So, good morning, everyone. Officially, welcome to Thursday. Couple things, couple of quick announcements. Number one, in about, almost a week, we have a field trip to go on. So, I'm going to take you to the Museum of Anthropology on UBC campus. I have a bus coming for us at 10 o'clock next Friday. And so we will all go downstairs and get on a yellow bus. It will drive us in luxury to the museum. We will hang out there for an hour or so, maybe a little bit more. I've got a short assignment for you to do while you're there. Then the bus will escort you in style back to the college just in time for your third block. So what's that? Do we still have another what? After it? Well, yeah, like your third block is, yeah, I can't, yeah. You'll be back in time for it. Or maybe a little bit late.
Wait, next Friday.
Next Friday. Is that okay? What's that? The 12th. Is that okay, Felicia? Can you fit it into your busy schedule? You have what? Oh, okay. Do you have a test or a class? Test? Okay. Who's that, Mr. Keith? Mr. Will? Okay, I'll talk to Mr. Will. Okay, so anyway, can I continue? So we're going to go do that. The college is going to pay 80% of the cost for this field trip. So we had to pay for museum entrance and for the bus. And so the college is paid 80%, but the rest is going to be paid by you. Haha. So it's $6. Okay. So next week I'll ask you for the $6. If it is difficult for you to pay the $6, if you just do not have the money, come talk to me and we'll try to figure something out. But yeah, otherwise $6 and I will whisk you off to a cool place for a class. Okay. Now, the second thing I'll point out to you is that tomorrow I will give you the sort of outline for the final project, because in this class, of course, there's no final exam. There's just a final assignment. So I will give you the sort of initial description of what that is and sort of lay out what it will look like, because I think we're down to about 4 weeks. So we're going to have to start moving on this. So I will give that to you tomorrow and you'll have some idea of what that will look like. You can ask some questions and maybe we can go from there, okay? Third thing is I just handed back your quizzes there again. So I've added I've added +3 to your score. And let's review it. Let's review it very quickly just so we all know what we're talking about, okay? So number one, we said that Egyptian writing and Sumerian cuneiform. Sumerian writing, sorry, Tafadzo, I've got your stuff right here. I've got Kang's here too. Okay. Kang's here, and that's you too, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So the writing systems are different. How are they different? Well, we said that one has kind of only one version, right? The Sumerian cuneiform only has one way of writing. The Egyptians have kind of 3 different ways of writing depending on what the context is, right? Is it a formal religious setting or is it just somebody jotting notes, right? So they have different manners of writing depending on the context. You could have said, although I wasn't thinking about this when I wrote the question, but you could have also said that the material is different, right? The Egyptians tended to write on papyrus, the Sumerians tended to write in clay, but of course both of them wrote on stone as well, so kind of wasn't thinking of that, but maybe for a half point. The important one, the big difference we said was that the cuneiform writing was made up of phonograms, right? So it was a phonetic alphabet, and so each little character actually represents a sound, right? And you read out the letters and you make all the sounds. But ancient Egyptian was a little bit different, right? They had lots of ideograms or ideograms. So the symbol represents an entire word, right? Or an entire concept. So again, I was mostly looking for 3 versions and 1 version, and phonetic versus ideogram, okay? That's kind of what I was looking for. Again, if you said the different materials, yeah, that was kind of okay too. I wasn't thinking about it, but that could also be correct. What's the significance of the East and the West, people? I can barely hear you, Felicia.
Like it's social class as like pyramid level of social class, and for the West, it's like known for their mummification.
It's what?
Known for mummification.
Yeah, so it's a distinction between the living and the dead, right? And so the East is the land of the living. That's where the sun rises, right? Where the sun sets, that's where the sun goes to die. That's the land of the dead, right? So often people will be buried in the west, right? Either on the west bank of the river or to the west of the settlement, because again, that's where the sun dies, right? The East is the land of the living. The West is the land of the dead. This was a really difficult question. In the Sumerian pantheon, we said that they had a sheep god, right? Which was weird because the Sumerians were farmers. They were agriculturalists, right? And so most people who are agriculturalists, most people who are farmers, they have some sort of farming god, right? They have a god of the harvest or something like that. But it's interesting that the Sumerians had this sheep god. And in the video, Mike Rugnetis said, well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe it tells us something about who the Sumerians were earlier in their history, right? Maybe once upon a time, they were herders of sheep, right? And so they prayed to the sheep god to take care of their sheep or whatever they prayed for. But now they've kind of developed, right? Now they're an agricultural community, but still they have this sheep god that's left over from their olden days, right? So kind of interesting, kind of strange, right? To not have an agricultural god, but to have a sheep god instead. Although, granted, what's interesting to one person may not be interesting to another. Hathor, we said she's an ancient Egyptian goddess, right? She's kind of like a goddess of love, but also of sexuality, also of fertility and motherhood, right? She's all kinds of sort of feminine love and sexual and sort of pregnancy energy, right? Sometimes she's shown as a cow or a woman with cow head. Some people said that she was associated with Narmer, because Hathor was on that Narmer palette that we saw. We saw a picture of it at the beginning of ancient Egypt. I wasn't really looking for that, but it is undeniably true, right? Narmer had put Hathor on that piece of stone, so I'll give you that one. Yeah, as I say, ancient Egyptian Beyonce. That's the way I like to think about her. The Rig Veda, we said, was the original kind of book of hymns of the Indo-Aryans, right? So these hymns were kind of songs sung to the gods, if you will. And the Indo-Aryans were probably singing them to the gods for centuries before they were written down, right? But finally, when they were written down, we were able to read them and sort of learn a little bit about who these people are, right? And so some of the things I think we learned was that they were polytheistic, right? They had multiple gods. I think at one point, I think we heard 33, but then we also heard there were many more. So I'm not really sure. There's more than one god, that's for sure. The biggest god was kind of Indra, right? He was the god of the storm and the rain, but also kind of a protector, warrior kind of god. We know that they divided the existence into the heavens and the earth and the underworld. We know that they drank soma so that they could stay up all night and sing to the gods and pray to them. Did I miss anything? Anything else about their religion? Yeah, got it.
Another god is Agni.
Oh yeah, Ani?
Agni. I think it's Agni.
Okay. Oh yeah, so there was that other, and that god was more of a domestic god, right? A god of the home. Yeah.
They have many different kinds of gods. For example, some gods for the sky, earth, wind.
Yeah.
And anything else.
Sure, different gods associated with different things.
And I think they have the head of the animals.
Not the Indian ones, no.
It was in Antiquity.
Yeah. Okay, and then the last one was these sort of mantras or these chants that Brahmin priests were using. Saw that in the video, and the narrator said that these are really interesting because they're not in any known language, right? So the sort of original Brahmin priests would have spoken some sort of indigenous Indian language, right? Because Sanskrit came in with the Indo-Europeans a little bit later, so they would have spoken another Indian language. But these mantras or these chants, they're not in that language either, right? They're something older, right? And so the language that they're in, that language has kind of died, and nobody speaks it anymore. But because these Brahmin priests are repeating it and sort of handing it down, it's been preserved for who knows how long, right? And linguists were saying that the sort of patterns of speech in them aren't similar to any kind of language that's known. And actually, they're most similar to bird songs. So who knows how old these things are, but they might go back to kind of the beginnings of human language, right? So they're not just they might be tens of thousands of years old, right? And again, we don't know what language they come from, but they've somehow been preserved all the way into almost the present, into the present day, right? Which is unbelievable, right? Unbelievable. Okay, so that's the quiz, right? Maybe a little bit of a tough one, but I think we got it eventually. Okay, so let's jump into yesterday. So we were talking about China. And we were talking about this first emperor of Qin, right? So the Warring States period is going to come to an end when finally all of these kingdoms that were fighting with each other are brought under the control of one ruler, right? And we read a little bit about that in the textbook. We also read a little bit about Shenyang, who was kind of the founder of this idea of legalism way back in the Zhou period. So legalism is actually not from the Qin, it's actually from the Zhou, right? So it's before the Warring States period. It's at the same time as Confucius, right? And so these legalists are, like you told me yesterday, trying to ensure that the king or the emperor can have absolute control over his kingdom, right? And Shenyang and the legalists say that the best way to do this is to create a system, right? To create a government system of rules and responsibilities and laws and punishments so that the king can control everything, right? But everyone always knows what they need to do, right? The system can kind of operate without constant decisions from the king or from the emperor, right? So we heard a little bit about the organization of villages, right? We heard about the bureaucracy or the civil service, just like next door here. We learned a little bit about the law code and the fact that the crimes and punishments were all laid out in advance and they apply to everyone equally, which is, again, for the ancient world, very interesting. Right? Yeah, and so this kind of system that's founded under the Zhou is used by the Qin, and as you can see here, yeah, it creates this transparent set of expectations, right? It's much easier for you to do your job for the king if you know what the king expects all the time, right? If you have to wait for him to tell you what to do, things don't work very well, right? And so here there is a clear set of expectations, and the king can kind of keep better control over people because of that. So it's a good idea. And so that moved us, or that led us into this documentary here on first emperor of China. And again, it's kind of telling the story of the first emperor of Qin, right? So we saw him yesterday trying to bring the last kingdom under control, right, to sort of end the warring states period. We saw a prime minister try to overthrow him, right? We saw a planned coup or a planned revolt, but it didn't work, right? And the conspirators, the rebels, one person was pulled apart with horses, ugh, right? Thank God we didn't see that. And then the prime minister, the leader, was forced to drink poison, right? And so that made this king here, King Zhang, I think his name was, made him the sole ruler, and then he's trying to bring that last kingdom under control. And we saw that last kingdom try to assassinate him, right? They brought him the head of a treacherous general in a box. It's a brutal period of history, right? Bring him the head, and then a scroll that says, oh, we pledge allegiance to you, right? We will be loyal to you. But of course, inside the scroll was a knife, and they tried to kill the king, right? But that didn't work very well either. And so I think that's kind of where we left off, right?
That's like the beginning of Qin Dynasty?
Well, that's what?
The beginning of Qin Dynasty.
Yeah. So that's the last kingdom that's kind of being brought under control. So, yeah, so Yin Zhang is the first kind of ruler of Qin Dynasty, right? So we kind of see him. It's very dramatic whenever he's on screen, right? Because the narrator's like, he's the first king of Jin. And then the music is like, da, 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 you know. So you can always, they're trying to be very dramatic about it. So, yeah, we saw an attempted coup. That didn't work. And then we saw an attempted assassination. That doesn't work either. And so now he's kind of in the position to make himself, you know, the emperor, right? The controller of all of ancient China. So yesterday we started watching, and I think we saw some of these things, right? So what did we see in terms of subsistence? What did we see about people getting food?
Just like the law.
They what?
Just like the law.
Okay, well, we saw lots of war, for sure, right? We saw lots of horseback riding and archers and... What's that?
It's like Indian with the seal like this.
Mm-hmm. What did we see? Did we see anyone? I think we saw some...
We haven't finished the movie.
No, we haven't finished the movie, but we saw some things already.
Oh, yeah, they're like normal teenagers, even though they're in the boarding state there. Yeah, they still sit there
Yeah. Yeah, we saw some simple farming, right? We saw someone plowing with an ox. We saw a young man kind of leaving home to join the army, right? Leaving the farm. And again, it's important to keep in mind in this period that, you know, warfare kind of starts and stops around the harvest, right? Because people have to eat. And so often in the ancient world, people will declare war. They'll go off, they'll fight the war for a while, but then if it's time to take care of the crops, everybody there's a timeout and everybody goes home and looks after the crops, right? Because if the crops fail, then nobody eats and everyone dies, right? So you kind of fight as long as you can, and then everyone takes a timeout to go home and look after their farm, right? You can't just fight a war, constantly for years, right? You have to take a break to look after the farm. So we do see some fighting, but we also, see some people living in, some pretty basic conditions, plowing and growing crops, right?
Do they trade the goods or they have money to buy the goods?
I think in this there is some currency around, but it would probably be both, right? So people were probably using money, but they were probably also trading their harvest for what they needed, probably. What did we see in terms of governance or authority or law? We see a social hierarchy. In what way did we see that? Yeah, we kind of saw all kinds of different people, right? The emperor, his kind of government ministers or people that serve him. We saw some warriors, and then we also saw some just regular farmers, right? Regular people living their lives, right? So we see that there's a social hierarchy here. What else did we see?
The emperor, of course, maybe around that time, the guy in the council just to get involved in the war.
Right. So we see that the emperor is kind of the sole authority here in ancient China, right? And we also see that with the young man going off to war. Yeah. Yeah. What did they say about why young men would go off to war? Because what? Right. So they could win. If they managed to survive, they could gain some honor, right, and some prestige for their father and their family. That's true. What I think they also said something about they could escape the drudgery of the farm, and I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I think in the modern world, lots of people who grow up on farms tend to leave them, right? They tend to want, especially young people, I feel like they want a life in the city, right? They don't want to be on the farm. They want to be, doing something different with their life. And I wonder if it was the same thousands of years ago that, young people grew up on the farm, but then really wanted to leave it if they could. What's that? I don't know. Could be, right? So sometimes armies are rewarded, right? So sometimes you get money, you get bonuses. Maybe you get to, if you take over a kingdom, sometimes you get to loot and pillage and keep the things that you steal. So being in the army you can make money from it. It would be exciting, right? I've never been a farmer, but I assume farming is not very exciting. Warfare is certainly exciting, as long as you don't get killed. So, I don't know. I could see some young men being drawn to that life, but dangerous, right? It's a brutal time.
Sure. Now in our country it's like this. Some soldiers get money to go to war.
Sure.
But in the past it's like it's a simple work that like the soldier can earn money better than the farmers.
Yeah.
And the best choice of them is going to government and work for them and be soldier for them.
Yeah.
But now it's not like this, but it's not getting like turned off, but it's a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true, right? You know, maybe farming isn't the most exciting thing to do, and maybe it's not the most sort of lucrative thing to do, right, in terms of making money. And yeah, maybe a life in the military is exciting, right, and brings new possibilities, right? Or at least that's the way they sell it in the commercials anyway. What do people's homes look like? How do people live? What's that? Normal? Yeah, they live with their family. In what kind of structures or buildings?
All of them made by wood, and so, 80% or 90% of them have animals. They they use with animals, like they use from cows and something like this, and some of them farming.
Yeah. So yeah, we saw some people with animals on the farm, right, and living in just a small little hut with kind of a fence around it, right? Of course, the emperor doesn't live in a house like that, right? He lives in a pretty fancy stone structure, right, with carpets and decorations and all kinds of things, right? Probably great food. Maybe we'll see some food in the second part. What kind of technology do we see? What? Weapons? What kind of weapons?
I don't know the name, but like it looks like
Crossbow. Yeah. Crossbows we see, right? What else do we see?
Can you call the flags technology?
Sure.
Because
Sure.
they use the flags a lot.
Yeah, lots of flags, right, for kind of marking who the king is, but also for signaling, right? We saw that one guy signaling with the flag, and then everyone started marching, right? That's technology. What else? What? Swords. Lots of swords. Yeah, they're all wearing armor, right? And helmets. Say again? Horses? Yeah, I don't think the horse would be a technology, but then there's technology that goes along with horse riding, right? You've got to have the reins and a saddle and kind of carts or chariots that are pulled. Yeah. There's stuff associated with the horse that's technology. The what? The bows, yeah, definitely. Other technologies that we saw. To shout? Oh, like a horn of some. Yeah, yeah, some sort of noise-making horn, right? Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, that's good. What else? Bombs? Not yet. Not yet. I don't know that gunpowder is invented yet. Later. What? Clothing. Lots of different clothing, right? Lots of hats. Interesting hats. Let's see. What's that? What did you say? Bronze? Yeah. Yeah, definitely bronze is a material that's used, right? Might even be iron by this time, actually. They might be using iron. Let's see, the plow, right? On the family farm, we see the ox is pulling a plow. Plow is technology. Maybe ropes to pull apart your enemies with the horse. Oof. That's gotta be a rough way to. It's gotta be a rough way to go. What? Yeah. Yeah, they were writing on paper, right? There was a big scroll that they brought to the king, right? So paper, for sure. Do we see any evidence of spiritual or religious beliefs? I feel like we don't. I don't remember seeing anything. Maybe not. And cultural expressions. Music, dance, art. War? Just lots of war? Yeah. Yeah. The king's palace is very nicely decorated, right? I noticed there's a big kind of dragon mural behind him, right, when he sits on his dais, right? That raised area that nobody can set foot on unless he gives his permission, right? So there's a big dragon, but there's also lots of curtains and rugs and things like that, right? It's beautifully decorated. Okay, let's watch let's watch the rest of it and see what else we see. Okay, so again, we'll pay attention to these same things, but we'll keep watching. Okay, so did we watch 15 minutes yesterday? We did, right? You don't know? I think that's correct. So just give me a second here. Wow. Give me a second here. Okay. Ugh, where is it? Un momento, por favor. Good. Okay. So let's see what we see. Online people, there's the link, of course, just in the live chat. And we'll start watching from 15 minutes onward. Let me just see here. 9. Yeah, we'll just watch the rest of it because it's not that long. Just go back here. Yeah. So we'll start watching at 15 minutes and see what we see, okay? So online people, will see you once the movie's over, okay? Okay, and we are back. So, in this second kind of portion of the film that we watched, what other things did we see? You can pick any of these. We don't have to go in order.
Technology.
The technology, yeah, what kind of other technology did we see?
How they make
Dagger.
the bronze and they make the weapon.
There's
Okay.
dagger.
Yeah.
More weapons, what?
Dagger.
And daggers?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're making those statues, right? Those clay statues that are kind of models of the emperor's army,
Yeah.
right? And they didn't really say this in the documentary, but you may know this already. But each one of them is different. So their faces are different. They're wearing kind of different armor. I'm not sure if they're exact models of real people. Maybe, maybe not.
Is it like his real soldier's face or like he just made it?
Yeah, well, we don't know that. But we do, it's possible because we do know that all the faces are different, right? They all have kind of a personality. So maybe, yeah, maybe maybe his soldiers modeled, for those statues, and maybe that's what those people actually looked like, which is wild, right? Thousands of them too. What else did we see about any of these things?
Handmade hills.
Handmade?
Hills. Handmade.
Oh yeah, his tomb is a giant man-made hill, right? And you could see from the footage they're really big, right? Really, really big. It had to cover over.
How did they build it?
How'd they build the hill?
Yes.
I assume by just putting dirt in a cart and piling it on top. I don't think there was any. I think, yeah, well, I don't think there's any like magic to it. I think it's just a lot of work to build a giant hill. But yeah, I don't think it's a technique. I think it's just a lot of work. What else did we see about any of these?
Cultural expressions.
Social what?
The cultural expression.
Okay, what do we see?
The music.
Yeah.
The drum and instrument.
Yeah, I guess a sort of celebration of Qin's coronation as the emperor. We see the big drums, right? Doo, 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 and everybody's kind of stomping, and yeah, we see some music and celebration. Yeah, we see some traditional dancing, right? So again, at the coronation ceremony, there's some music, and those women are dancing with that sort of material, that fabric, whatever it is. It's very light.
They're just red and gold as the empire color.
Oh yeah, lots of red and gold, right? So maybe culturally significant colors that still, I think even in today in China, the red and gold are still important symbolic colors, right? What else?
People's house.
What's that?
People's house.
People's houses?
Yeah. Some of them living by brick, stone brick.
Yeah.
And some of the people living out of the city, their homes is maybe wood.
Yeah. Okay. So we see some construction within the city, out of stone, particularly the palace of the emperor, right? But regular people living in more simple wooden structures, right?
Is the crown like a cultural expression, like the way it's made? It doesn't look like a Western crown.
The crown?
Yeah.
I guess it could be, right? I guess you could say it is. A crown, I guess, is sort of technology, but also sort of clothing. But it's something, yeah. It's an expression of culture for sure. Yeah, I think we could say that, right? The crown he wears. What else do we see? The what? Oh, we see the classroom. Yeah, I don't know where that fits, but I guess we see education, right? And so we see a teacher at the front at the board pointing out the word for horse, right? Right. So they're writing on. Did you say wood?
Yeah, wood, like a piece of wood, like a stick.
Oh, yeah.
the game.
Yeah, we see them writing on some sort of paper-like substance. I'm not sure exactly what it was. It's probably made from wood. I don't know how processed it is, but yeah, see them writing. What else do we see?
Cozy.
What's that?
Traditional cozy.
Oh yeah, lots of traditional clothing, right? And again, this documentary has kind of done their best to make things as authentic as they can, right? And again, it doesn't look very Hollywood, but you know, maybe that's what things would have looked like, 3,000 years ago, right? Or well, closer to almost 2,300 years ago. What else? That stamp was pretty cool, right? Or the seal of the emperor, right? What did it look like it was carved from?
It was a stone.
Yeah, it was carved from stone. Looked kind of like jade to me. Did it look like jade to you? Kind of a greenish.
It was green, right?
Yeah.
What do you mean by G?
So jade is a mineral. Hang on a second here. Jade is a mineral, and it looks like,
It's a kind of stone.
yeah, it's a kind of stone. Here's some there's some jade. So you can see it's kind of got a sort of a deep green color to it, and again, it's still culturally significant for China, right? There is meaning. Jade has a certain kind of symbolic meaning, and it seems like maybe even in the past, even thousands of years ago, it still had meaning, right? And so, what was the purpose of that seal?
It was unique.
It was unique. It was just for the king.
Because I think it's very hard to find the size of the stone.
Definitely, it's a big chunk of jade, right? But also, what does it do when he? It acts like a. Yeah, it kind of acts like a signature, right? And so when somebody presents you with a paper, and then it's got the emperor's seal on it, it means this is like directly from the emperor, right? This is from, I think the narrator says, this is from heaven, basically. So when somebody hands you a scroll and it is signed by the emperor, it is serious business, right? If that scroll tells you to do something, you better do it. Yeah, and they can't really make another one, right? So his kind of authority is almost in the seal, because whatever he stamps.
When he died, like, they just took away his plans and, like, remember because Ethan Prince gonna be a new king.
Yeah, we saw, I guess maybe that fits into governance, I guess, that the younger son, I don't know if you've heard this word before, but he usurps the throne, right? He takes the throne even though it's not rightfully his, right? The will of Qin passes it on to the firstborn son, but the 18th born son, what does he do? He steals the will, writes a fake one, burns the real one, and then says, oh, look, it's the will in which I am named the new emperor. And the firstborn is told to commit suicide. Oof. That's cold, right? That's cold. So yeah, he kind of usurps the throne. I wonder how they found out about that. So yeah, we see kind of we see some intrigue, right? Some betrayal, some royal betrayal, which again happens a lot with kings and successions, right? When kings die, sometimes it gets a little dicey about who the next person on the throne is going to be. What's that?
Like a civil war between power.
Sometimes, yeah, right? If there's not a smooth transition from one emperor or one king to the next, yeah, you can have civil war. We'll see that when we get to Rome, by the way. Anything else we see?
Spiritual or religious beliefs.
Uh,
The king want to get the eternal life. So like some people will put them the pills or like some
Inject some
balls.
mercury.
yeah,
Yeah, and they say after you take this, you have eternal life, then the king died.
yeah. Whoops, right? So the king is trying, or the emperor is trying to live forever, right? The only enemy left is death, and so he gets his alchemist to try to create some sort of magic pills that will keep him from dying, but
Did they know that the alchemist is the one who killed him?
No.
well, nobody knows, right? Nobody knows what that stuff does, right? And so clearly they didn't, because mercury is highly toxic, right? What's that? How did they find it? Well, I mean, it's naturally occurring. I don't know how or where you find it, but it's a natural element, right? It doesn't really, as far as I know, it doesn't really combine with anything.
Just like
I guess you can get mercuric oxide, right? But it doesn't, like chemically speaking, I don't think mercury likes to react with a lot of things. So like people could have found it in nature, but not knowing what it is, and you got to admit it's pretty amazing stuff, right? Looks like a metal, but it's just liquid and it pours. Crazy stuff, right? So they obviously thought that it had magical properties, and so fed it to the emperor. But of course, whoops, highly toxic, right? Builds up in your system, builds up in your brain, kind of makes you go a little bit crazy, and then dead, right? So maybe a little bit of technology there, right? But also failed technology. Oops, epic fail. Let's see. Anything else we saw? They what? Yeah, they have an alchemist, right? So that's kind of evidence of technology and science, right? Even though these guys didn't really know what they were doing, but they were putting together different compounds and experimenting with them and imagining what those compounds might do or might not do. It's not sound science, but it's some sort of something. We heard a little bit about spiritual beliefs as well, because why was the emperor being buried with all of those terracotta statues?
He believes that his soldiers will guard him, even from
Yeah. Yeah, so there's kind of evidence of an afterlife here, right? There's the idea that Qin will somehow live again in the next world, whatever that is, and he feels he needs his royal guard with him, right? So they're going to bury models of that royal guard so that they can continue to assist him in the next life. So yeah, there's some evidence of an afterlife here, right? If the Chinese didn't believe in an afterlife, they never would have buried all that stuff, right? So there's evidence of them believing in something after death. Oh, did you see the sandals? Speaking of technology, the sandals the women were wearing? Kind of cool, right? Those wooden ones with the blocks on the bottom?
It was made by wood, right?
Yeah, kind of wooden sandals.
They also already have a marriage system on that.
Oh yeah. We see a marriage ceremony, right? We see the archer get married to one of the palace servant girls, right? That's so cute. I hope those two made it. Yeah, the marriage ceremony was kind of interesting. What did you notice about it? Yeah, I guess it was kind of arranged by the emperor. They were, oh yeah, more red clothing. Bride was covered. I wonder why. I wonder why the bride's face was covered. Any idea?
They are covered from the emperor.
Maybe. Well, and we kind of do that here in the West too, right? Often women will wear a veil when they get married, and it's kind of see-through, right? So you can see the woman's face. But then the groom will sort of take it off and kiss the bride, right? That's really interesting, and I don't know for sure, but it reminds me of there's lots of rituals that societies have in which people go from being one thing to another. Okay? Sometimes they're called rites of passage, right? And marriage is a big one. And so when you go through a rite of passage, you start out as something and then you become something else, right? And so the woman starts out as a woman, and then she kind of emerges as a wife kind of thing, right? And so all of these rituals have things where you have this space where you're kind of in the middle and you're neither one thing or the other. And I think that's what happens, right? Is that the woman is kind of covered, right? And so she's kind of during the marriage ceremony, she's kind of in between two things, right? She's not an unmarried woman, but she's not a married woman yet either, right? And so during this marriage ceremony, she's kind of covered, right? She's kind of not in either world. And then when she gets married, then the veil is revealed, and now she's something different, right? She's something different than she was before. And again, there's lots of cultural practices where that happens, right? Where someone goes from one thing to another, and during the ritual, they're kind of in the middle, and they're neither one thing or the other, right?
So we have something like this in our culture.
How does it go?
It's like this, but it's they getting dressed, the woman getting dressed like this in the morning of the ceremony.
Yeah.
Then like the men go to like hairdresser
Mm-hmm.
to pick them up, and they like dress like it. After, no, I don't know the meaning of the words in English. The meaning of the like ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
After one ceremony before the like celebrating,
Yeah.
they reading something and sign something. After that they take out the like something.
Right.
They give some promises to each other. For
Yep.
example, the man give promise, I will take care of you until I'm.
All that stuff. Yeah.
To be honest,
Yeah. But yeah, it's a similar thing, right? And again, if you want to sound really smart, it's what an anthropologist would call a liminal space, right? So it's when you are between two things, but you're not one thing or the other, right? And some people might argue that, some of you are in that space now, right? Because you're kind of in between being a child and being an adult, right? You're not fully an adult, you're kind of getting close-ish, but you're not quite there. But you're definitely not children either, right? And so you're kind of in this middle space. You're not one thing or the other, right? But many of our cultures, once upon a time, we used to have ceremonies where young people were brought into adulthood, right? Some sort of ceremony where you become a man, right? Or you become a woman. But strangely enough, often we don't really have those so much anymore. And lots of people, I think, are sometimes confused about, well, am I an adult now? Like legally, you might be, but are you, right? And so a lot of people, I think, kind of struggle with what they are or how they feel because they don't know when they kind of step over the line, right? When do you step from being a child to being an adult, right? And if you don't get married right away, or if you don't, buy a house or any of those things, then how do you know, right? The law might say that at 19 you're an adult, but are you? Do you feel like one? Has anything changed since you were 18? It's hard to know, right? And so lots of traditional societies have these rituals that bring people into adulthood so that that you're going to go through the initiation or the ritual or the ceremony, and when it's done, you will be a man, right? Or you will be a woman. But yeah, often nowadays we don't really have such a thing, and it's kind of confusing sometimes, I think. Anyway, Enough about that because we have stepped over the line and this class is now over. So come back tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit more about the field trip. I will try to give you your final assignment tomorrow so that you'll know what it looks like and we can start working towards it. Okay? But you'll get notice of it tomorrow. And then I think we'll probably be able to finish off China tomorrow too. But until then, that is it. Pack it up. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Bye, people.